Today we have Matt, a formal guest from I think season 2, season 3. It's been a bit since we last talked, maybe a year or more. So thanks for coming back onto the show.
Yeah, it's awesome. Good to chat with you. I know since then we've met up in person, so now we're both dads too. So that's like a completely different realm. So it's
That
wild.
was Yeah, it was fun how that kind of came to be. We connected before that, and then that kind of both of our journeys kind of had that come out, and then it's like sweet, let's keep being friends now that we have similar journeys. Not that we wouldn't have been anyway. The only reasonable excuse for almost missing this release, being a dad, which is kind of meta as this episode is all about fatherhood, as both Matt and I have transitioned into this new role. We also chat about DDC, the differences between B2B, B2C, DDC, paid ads, and a little bit on AI. I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you want to go deeper on Matt's insights, he's from season 3, episode 1. This is episode 9 of Friends of On Marketing, recorded on February 14th, 2025. This is a show where I bring friends, guests of On Marketing back on to talk anything. Emphasis on the anything. I hope it gets weird. Thank you for being here, and make sure to follow and support my friends. Their work is important, and so is yours. So reach out if you want to chat marketing, and maybe you'll get your future friends episode. Before we get back to our conversation, let's get this out of the way. All opinions shared in this podcast are the individual views of the host and friends, guests, not those of their employers or associated organizations. This content is intended for informational purposes and should not be considered professional, marketing, or life guidance. Listeners act on the information provided at their own risk. Thank you for being here. I wanted to get to the father, to the dad kind of conversation because I find that to be very fascinating, this new piece of my life, your life. But let's focus a little bit more on the business. You've been in this space for a bit, the DDC, direct to consumer. If anybody I didn't really know about that probably like a year or so ago. Help me just understand from like a high level. You have DDC, you have B2B, you have B2C. Like what's the differences? What are similarities? Being kind of you've been in B2B, you're now in D2C. What do you see as similarities? And then maybe what are those stark differences?
I mean, this could be the entire episode, so I won't go too far, but I would say like initially, if anyone listened to the original episode I was on with you, like talking more of just like my journey through marketing, and I would say like my first step into marketing was more of like B2C, little B2B. I would say just like the very long and the short of it is like D2C is just much more fast paced. A lot more pressure, a lot more running and gunning. Like, hey, we got some new creative we want to launch and test. It's not like this huge forecast of like we're looking for like this project in Q2 that we're going to talk about in January that's going to get rolled out. It's very quick. Now, there will be some products that, you have on a timeline that will get dropped, but most of that creative is getting approved the week of, if anything, and it's batches. And so you're just it's a lot more fast paced. Which is fun. You can really see like on a day-to-day basis, whether in a certain ads manager or Shopify or some reporting software, like truly like on a day-to-day basis. Like as recording on this particular Friday, we already hit a sales goal for a client halfway through the month. And she even messaged like, hey, why is today even just so much better? And even looking and seeing that is just like really gratifying. You can see like the work that you've done throughout the whole week or the whole month. Where in like B2B marketing or B2C marketing, it's like such a longer tail. And that's kind of you think of traditional marketing as like campaigns, right? Anything we saw during the Super Bowl, large campaign. I can only imagine the time invested into it. We already know how much it costs, but just to go from that route is like, I think that's a lot more pressure, or a different type of pressure, right? It's this massive buildup. That it's like training for a marathon. You're like, hopefully everything rolls out and elements are fine. I get a good night's sleep and I carb loaded properly. I'm hydrated. Where it's like D2C is more like you're going to a track meet. Like you've done this a few times. It's kind of the same thing over and over. And you're just trying to just get a little bit better each time. And that's kind of the way I look at D2C marketing. Like you can take certain metrics that you've done. How do we get them better? You can make some, common denominators or assumptions around certain things. But until you've tested and done it enough, you really don't know what's working, and things change a lot. We had same client that ran out of one of their top 2 sellers for a while, came back in stock, and then the FDA actually, as it was coming in to Indiana in their warehouse, stopped it, and they needed to inspect it, and that could have been 2 days, 2 months, ended up being like a week and a half, but ever since we've gotten back in stock, it's opened up. So I feel like in my previous B2B, B2C experience, like if that happens, it's like, holy cow, you eliminated half of our business. It's like, no, just tread water. It's only a short period. So, and I think everything is just, I look at it more of just like people that are more apt to buy like on impulse. And that's really where D2C is. Like that's what e-commerce is people seeing an ad, buying on impulse and transacting. I think of like a a business that's selling, products that's between like $30 and $40, and people are going to buy instantly, right? B2C, more, I would maybe it's a car purchase or some larger, 3-4 figure purchase. It takes longer of a consideration period, so much more faster environment, but a lot more at risk. Things can change quickly, and you might be having a great week, but the last half of the week is not so much because things have changed. So it's just a little bit more fast paced, I guess.
On a recent podcast, you had shared that of in B2B or in the past roles, you would wait very long before having that gratifying experience. And as you just said, you get those more rapidly, it seems, with the DDC. You're having these either high highs maybe or low lows. Like we didn't hit said sale goal, or yeah, that's very interesting. Maybe the biggest challenge I maybe have is that B2C to D2C is the direct, that keyword that you're just going direct to the consumer. So buying on Instagram, TikTok shop versus I have to go to the dealership to buy the car. Is that kind of a good?
Yeah, and I think B2C falls into more that like typical like 7 points of contact to make a decision, and I think so. It's like, okay, I saw an advertisement on TV or on a streaming platform, and then all of a sudden I see a billboard, and then I get some piece of mail that I might just throw out, and then I'm seeing like all these retargeting assets where I think there's still some merit to that in D2C, but I would say it's probably like 3 or 4 touch points. I think maybe you see an ad, you click it, you get to the website, you get retargeted, thinking that it's your phone or your computer's listening to you, which who knows if that's the case, but it's generally not. It's generally there's cookies trailing you, and then maybe you get signed up for an email list, and that's about it. And again, we're not considering a $100, $1,000 purchase. Sometimes there's those clients that are in that space AOV wise, but generally it's impulsive. So I found I would say within a 7-day period, you're going to buy. So I saw maybe a new shirt or a new hat, saw the ad within 7 days. Maybe I made that purchase, and Google or TikTok or Meta is going to take the cut of whatever that is based off of, hey, you clicked here and you bought it then. They're going to attribute that back. So I would say it's much closer to B2C, but I would say a shorter tail and way more impulsive, like you mentioned.
Definitely similarities, but definitely differences in the buying behavior and probably the audiences or who fits, like buying off TikTok shop. Maybe now sticking in the D2C world, because that's kind of where you're playing a lot right now. What's the future? What's going to be the same? What's going to change drastically? I don't know. Is AI at all? I know with like SEO in my world, AI is the talk of the town, but is D2C, is that? Just share a little bit of what you're seeing in the future, what might change and what might stay the same in D2C.
I think the main players are constantly evolving, being Google, Meta, and TikTok. I don't deal as much on like the pay-per-click Google or Microsoft end, and I think they've already maybe had their heyday when they implemented like Performance Max. It's kind of a little bit of set it and forget it type of a setup. Meta and TikTok, there's been some AI. I think all three of those have had some AI implementations. I see AI more of I'd see it more of like the creative aspect, or even like the copy editing and those things. Like it gets you in the right direction. There's a few apps out there that I've been pushing our team to test, and we have actually invested just small trials into them that can actually produce like full length like AI videos, which is kind of nuts. So you could upload, the first, I don't know, 7.5 minutes of this podcast and be able to pull our voice, our facial recognition, and should be able to upload. I've never tested it, so that's one thing. I think on the creative element, but we've known that. I mean, as far as static images, right, between Midjourney or ChatGPT, like there's always kind of been that. Even Grok. I mean, I can even do that from Twitter sometimes, and I'm a sports guy, so I'm putting jersey swaps for Aaron Rodgers, or see if I can get Patrick Mahomes doing something crazy. Like it's just that's very simple. And then copy, I think, was the main one to start, right? ChatGPT from its infancy, that's really what it did, and that's only improving. I don't think AI, as far as like media buying, is fully there yet. I think it's becoming a little bit more set it and forget it, kind of like where Performance Max is. There's some things within Meta that are supposed to be rolling out in the next month or so to kind of eliminate the need to get in there and set up different targeting or interests, but also that makes my job, or part of my job, less important. But I still think there's like, hey, just because you have someone maybe that's running a smaller operation that can go in and upload assets, I still see that from time and time again, even things that are supposed to be a little more passive, aren't getting done the right way. There still needs to be that human element there. So I think it kind of goes back to everything AI. Like, it's great to get it off the ground, but you need that human interaction. I don't think we've gotten past that point where it's just a set it and forget it. But I would say, like, Meta's rolling out with some new things. TikTok's constantly rolling out with some stuff. I think they were holding a few things close to their chest when they were waiting if the ban would go through. But even TikTok, I mean, it's a little bit more volatile. I think there's a couple different avenues you can take it. Some clients have great weeks on TikTok, some don't. It's just kind of more of a volume game as far as creative goes. But yeah, I think just between like TikTok Shop, they have smart campaigns, just traditional like, hey, drop 4 or 5 pieces of creative and push it, and maybe it'll do well going to the website. But I always look at Meta and TikTok kind of as competition. I know there's like an Amazon one that's out there, like a seller, or not a seller, like a creator one, which I didn't even know about. I thought it was going to take a while for it to get off the ground. So it's kind of in its infancy. So maybe that's the future. If you think about it, like Amazon is the commerce center, but if they added in like a more of a social or creator element that people are going to sell on there or promote there, I think that's another way to do it, kind of the reverse angle of what Meta and TikTok have done. So always new things out there. I always like to dabble and hear about them, but I don't really like to dive in right away and be the first one to try it, although it'd be nice. It's just you're dealing with other people's money, so you want to make sure you have some confidence in it. Maybe talk to a rep or something that you can get, hey, can you I mean, there's other ones too, like Meta or TikTok will say, hey, we'll match you 50% of the spend, or I mean, those are less and less, but I still always like to advocate that, because it's like, hey, I'm not going to tell a client, let's spend 20% of your budget this week on this, and it just completely flops. Like, some are okay with that, but some can't afford to do that.
So do you see, because I think we kind of talked about the DDC being ran by how people buy things that they want to just be, how do you see, or do you see consumers' ways in which they buy changing, or will it just keep kind of evolving where it's already being like we're more willing to buy off of the TikTok shop, which then Amazon, if they have we just are more like more people will start to. Do you see any other changes, or is that even not accurate maybe?
I always wanted to say it's like generational based, but I still think there are those people that are like skeptical of like uploading their, credit card information to a website. Or I mean, I think Amazon's pretty damn safe. I mean, over my experience of Amazon, not even safe or not, it's been just the customer service is great. TikTok, I understand some skepticism. I personally have bought a few things off TikTok just to try it. Like, why would I not? Like, I kind of almost have to. So that experience has been fine. I would say it's a little clunky sometimes as far as when you're trying to get through and see like, hey, where is this payment going, or where's this receipt? It's not as smooth. But I think consumers aren't that stupid. It's really tough to like, that's why like sometimes it's difficult to certain markets, let's call like apparel or fashion. It can be really, really difficult because like people know like you're going to have a sale coming this time, and this time. Why would I just wait? I don't necessarily need this new pair of pants or joggers or sweatshirt. Like, I can wait until Memorial Day or, God forbid, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And people are smart. They've known the routine. Like, hey, you sign up, you get this 15% off code. That's cool. Maybe I'll kind of wait and hang on to it. There's another promotion coming, 25% off a few weeks later. Glad I didn't use that. So like, people aren't that dumb, and they're always going to look for a sale too. The other aspect, we're dealing with this a lot more with my current agency, is like, we can push as many people as we want to TikTok or Meta, but ultimately like people are going to use Amazon. So if you're selling on Amazon, which is great, glad you have that funnel. It's like, well, if we're selling a $20 pair of joggers and you get a 10% off code, okay, you can buy that for $18 on the website, but it's a lot easier if I already have an Amazon account to go there and I'm going to get free shipping. It might even be cheaper. So it's like that's the tough thing. So people still love Amazon and the safeness, and like it's just I think it's kind of just the laziness or the inconvenience of being like, hey, I got to get my wallet to upload my credit card because I haven't saved it yet. But people get smarter. They know when the sales are coming, and I guess that's the other thing. Like Black Friday, Cyber Monday's been. I wouldn't say it's been on a downturn, but it's just like spans and contrasts. Some people run it for longer periods of time, hoping to capture people during that period that they're going to buy in the back half. Some think it's maybe a shorter cycle. You always kind of have to improve your opt-in percentage off too, just on a evergreen status. So Consumers aren't that dumb. I think there's some people that maybe just want to buy and get it right away, but people are going to wait more than likely. Even if it is for a $40 purchase or a $100 purchase, they're going to be intentional with where they're going to buy, and they're shop around. And Amazon's a great area to do that.
Yeah, Amazon definitely has quite a moat in that of, yeah, just the ability. I even do that where I'll find on a website, but I'm like, do they have it on Amazon? Because I already have everything in. So that makes a lot of sense. So Matt, when we last talked, you were kind of in a DDC role, but I think maybe from my external perception, you're starting to become more of a DDC marketer. How do you define who you are? And obviously, you kind of have like a lot of layers because you have like the Pack a Day podcast. You do a lot of these sports and all this, but maybe just sticking to the marketing. How do you coin yourself? Are you like, do you want to stay DDC for your rest of your future? Do you like have ideas of coming back into different realms, or what are your thoughts on that? Or maybe you're just flying the plane and you haven't thought about the plane at all. You're just flying it.
Yeah, I think I'm flying it, but also like understanding what else is going on in life. Like, I think right when we recently met up, I was looking for a different role at the time, just an agency switch. The current agency I'm at right now is called Lilo Social. Really loved my experience here since early December. It's been great. Just, same thing, D2C agency growth kind of opportunity. So my technical title is like a growth lead. So that'd be like a strategist or someone that's a little bit more higher level. One great thing here is like we just have a lot more support. So I have someone on every account of mine that is like the project manager. So someone like this, we'd be on a call with the client and they're taking notes of follow-ups that have to be done and they're tasking those out after. I don't have to mental dump after or distract myself keeping notes. Sometimes there'll be a certain little thing that like, oh, I'm going to follow up with that, but that's cool. We have someone that does, strategy as far as creative. Again, I'm part of that process, but they're more of that creative focus, seeing things in a little bit bigger picture of, hey, this is what's going on within the industry or certain segments that we can kind of lean into. And then someone that just assists me with like media buying. So, hey, the day-to-day of uploading assets or making optimizations is tedious and can take a lot of time. So having just that support is huge. And then I would say I like the agency life. I've been in the agency life for at the end of this year about 4 or 5 years now. So at some point I'd like to get in the inside of like a brand, but I also don't know if I would enjoy that. It kind of goes back to what we talked in the beginning. Like, would I enjoy in February talking about a launch of something in May? Maybe, I don't know. Like, if it's something massive, but I feel like those are constant conversations. That's not something that's like a once a year. I think it's always like a quarterly thing. So, and I feel like there's probably a lot more hierarchy and politics within that. And I don't necessarily enjoy that. I like the people that I talk just about on my team, like sharing ideas and seamlessly going between the creative department to the project manager, the media buyer, and like I enjoy that a lot because I think in the D2C space or any marketing, people will tell you they know what's going on, and it's like no one really has a complete grasp. Everything is so subjective. So like sharing ideas and what you're seeing. Had a couple examples even today. Someone on our team that's a similar role as me, but more on like the SEO, the Google side of things, and he asked me a question on Meta, and we started getting into the conversation. Like, well, before I actually ask you like 7 questions of what your question was, let me answer your question. But then like, here's a couple different reasons why we would go this way. So like, yeah, I like marketing. I like the whole aspect of just like internet things. I think it's cool, and just always having a pulse on it, whether it be with podcasting or running my own social media for just the Pack a Day podcast and putting my name out there that way. Or I think it just also just gives you credibility when you're talking to clients. Like, they don't have to know that I do podcasting or even do a hop on podcasts, but also I think it's important just to, if anything does come up, oh, I did see that on Twitter, or yeah, I heard about that's going on TikTok. I think that gives you a ton of credibility. And to be honest, like, I'm 34. Like, most of the people I work with actually are younger than me. So it's like, as I age, like, I do have to kind of stay up with it. You can't just like set it and forget it, because at some point I'm going to be working, let's say 5 years from now, I'm going to be 40 years old and might be working with a CMO that's 10 years younger than me. So you got to kind of stay up with it. But I do think about that. Flying the plane is like, okay, I have kids right now, liking to have some stability within the career, but it's also like, what does the D2C life look like in 5 years? What does marketing even look like in 5 years? So it's like, I think marketing is the area I need to be in, but like the D2C is just so fast, and like, it's just kind of interesting to be like, hey, I'm one of the older people here, but not even like average of people I've worked with in my life before. So yeah, I like marketing. It's kind of where I found myself in, and seems like it's always was meant to be, but like the D2C thing was just like came out of nowhere. Like, honestly, no expectations, but I can't see myself going back the opposite route in like traditional marketing because I just don't know if there's a role for me. And I think we talked about the last time, like just locally, I don't know if there's something like that. And even if it was from a bigger corporation, like is that even a thing hybrid wise or I don't know. We'll see what happens. But right now we're doing okay.
Yeah, it's almost like you went into the car that goes very fast and you don't want to go back to the horse because it
Exactly.
even feels like more slow. Where if you never got to DDC or you didn't feel this like aliveness with the speed and all that, then it would be like, oh yeah, the traditional marketing is the way it is. And this is definitely too baked into location. Green Bay, Wisconsin's where we're coming from. And we're just a few years, maybe a few could be light of behind on kind of where marketing's at. So then you're just constantly, I found, in different roles, kind of butting heads with very traditional. And it's just like, I'm not wasting my time arguing about social being a place to be social and not just post blogs. Like, this isn't like I'm wasting my time. I need to move on. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think there's like two sides of the coin. There's people who have 5-year, 10-year plans to the T. And then there's others who just don't have anything. I find the goal, or where I'm at, is in that middle where it's like, oh, like for you, just the example, it's like I DDC didn't plan that, but now that it's in my life, how do I orientate myself where I think there's some value in being able to dance with life versus like dictating to life, saying I want to be on the Packers, like, social media team. And it's like, well, like maybe there's other ways to get to where you're trying to go versus having it. So how do you, Matt, you kind of maybe shared in your answer kind of your approach to it a little bit in the middle too, but how do you approach that? Were you ever hardcore on 10-year plans and then you've changed, or were you always a little laissez-faire of like, let's just, put in the work and we'll get to where we're going?
I mean, when I was high school, middle school, it was like, hey, I want to do something in sports, and someone would ask you like what? Like, I have no idea, just something around sports. And then as you evolve, like I think I got into college and I was like, hey, doing like sports media would be fun, working at a radio station or a TV station. Then you kind of look at that career trajectory, what a 10-year plan is like that, and it's different markets and the pay's not that great. So you're like, oof, that doesn't sound fun. And, having seen friends and even my fiance that's been in that career and her father, it's like, man, there's a reason she got out of it. There's a reason, he's kind of stuck with it, but it's like, okay, don't want to do that. And then honestly kind of put that to the side and work jobs that were just like, this sucks. I don't love this, not doing, trying to just find ways outside of it that were passionate. And that's kind of how I found myself into the podcasting or putting out content more, and just like using, dabbling on the internet so much, but finding Twitter as a space to do that more often and just have that cadence of, interesting things, whether it be the Packers or overall NFL or sports or music or ongoings on the internet or just trolling. Truly, like sometimes it's fun just to get a couple tweets off, just because it's like, it's fun to see if someone else thinks it's funny or not. And all of a sudden you look at your phone and like, oh, they got like 300 likes for no reason, just because someone else thought my sarcasm was funny. So yeah, and I mean, working for the Packers would be great, but like, I look at those people, I look at that career, and like I kind of understand like that's also quite the grind too. I went to college with a few people that I'm acquaintances of, and they've gotten out of it at this point. They did it for a while, but it's like it's very taxing. So I don't even know what it would be at this point if I were. I think sport is awesome to me. I love it, but I don't even know what that role would be. Like, would I want to work for a team when they have like really weird hours now that I have a family? So. Yeah, I think it's like kind of never had like a true traditional like, hey, I'm going to go to school to be this, and then after 5 years I'm going to do this, and then move to a bigger market and do this, and then I'm going to be a partner of this, like whatever. I just don't have that. I don't think I've never really been wired that way to be like focused for 5 years on something, because I think things just change so much that, okay, I'm just going to die on the sword that was my 5-year plan. Like, I don't know, that seems pretty silly. Like, I think you should always be kind of just a little bit higher, having a goal in mind, right? Like, having a goal to, be able to provide for myself and be able to elevate myself and live a little bit more comfortably, which is like, okay, like I'll go switch marketing agency jobs once or twice over a couple years to get where I want to be. But it's not like I'm, taking no risks to do anything, but I'm also not taking just like any job that flies up, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the next 5 years is, but I know it's not going to be getting back into like doing TV, radio. I think just podcasting and tweeting enough is enough at that. Like that's not the grind for me. And if you look at that industry, even locally, it's a tough game.
No, I love that. And I think that's kind of like one of the things I've been able to think about my podcast is like in 10 years, Matt, you will have done like to revisit this conversation and like see, did he do something in sports marketing? Did he do something just in sports? Like, I think that's really cool, because I think the challenge in life is to close doors, which then would essentially say I have my dream or I have it, which is a good thing as you're talking about. But I think life constantly opens different doors. I mean, again, like when this podcast is recorded in today's time, we don't know a job that could be created in 2 years, 3 years. Like prompt engineering was, the talk of the town, and then quickly realized, wait, the machine will just do that for us. So like we don't need to pay someone, $200K just to engineer my prompts. But that was like an idea of like, you don't even know the jobs out there. So I find myself, I'm more in your boat where I think there's purpose. What you want to achieve is all good, but to be flexible, to put in the work every day and just to push forward, I think is far more valuable than having an answer. And then I come back to this questions versus answers. I think where we're at, it's just constant questions. Like, do I like what I'm doing right now? And you keep asking more versus like, this is my answer and I need to make this answer true. And I think people will, at the end of the day, not be as satisfied when they get their answer versus like keep getting deeper questions, which is the journey of life. So I'm in similar boat as you. Well, Matt, I want to get into some of the real conversation today, which we've touched on a bit, is you became a dad. I recently, 2 months ago, became a dad. You beat me to it. Let's just talk about that. Like, what has changed? Everything is an answer, but what has changed since becoming a father for you? Maybe like the main things that you've noticed now that you're, how many months are you at?
Eight and a half. They'll be about
Getting
9
close
next
to a year.
week, so it's crazy. That's actually you sent over the kind of the podcast outline, and that was the one thing the question I've been thinking about all week is just like how has it changed, right? And it's like I think initially really just weathered the storm for the first couple months. I mean, that's honestly 2024 summer. It was. I can't really think of many memorable things that happened. I mean, it was memorable because we had kids, but like didn't really get outside, tried to get outside as much as I could, but mostly was like going for a walk with maybe the 2 kids in a stroller, or very, very small things that were outside, like where I can really vividly remember that were like really impactful. And then all of a sudden they get into daycare, and that makes life a little bit easier, right? I have my work schedule, kind of got into that more of the routine. So yeah, everything has changed. It's dictated around what they need, when they need it. I think being a little bit, I was always pretty, after about the last like 7 or 8 years, pretty regimented with certain things, like doing certain things a certain way. Like, hey, I'm going to handle my Sunday like this, get ready for the next week, or, make sure my, eating habits are smooth, or, just when I'm doing certain chores and tasks, if I put them off, fine, I can take care of it. But like really, like there's a few times where like I would put it off when we have kids now. I'm like, oh man, like I can't get caught back up. Like I feel like I was gonna do that later today, and that's not the case anymore. And like, so that's just holding yourself accountable. I'm glad I kind of built those skills early on, but always can get better at them. Like I think everyone kind of procrastinates, so the sooner you get some stuff done, the less unpredictability you have with the kids, where the only predictability I really had was myself or some social obligation that may have just popped out of the blue that I couldn't do or ended up doing instead. The other one is kind of like just like an overly observant person at times, like for better or for worse. I would say now my observations and my memories are more towards the kids. So like if they're having a certain habit for a few days, I'm like, oh, this is what they're probably needing. Or, oh, I've noticed this over the last week, and kind of talk to that with Andrea, my fiance. And sometimes she notices the same thing. She would admit she's not as observant as I am. So she'd be like, oh, I didn't even think of that. And just trying to like piece together their growth pattern of like, hey, saw this was going on, maybe we should try this, or like certain things just to make them cope. Like for a while, like when they were really, really young, just like rubbing them on their leg or rubbing their head would calm them down. A little butt tap once in a while, you just kind of just sit there and like that helps. But those things change. I always, again, I just try to make up rules in my head, honestly, and see if that works. Like I still have the rule, like every 3 weeks, there's something new that we have to kind of adapt through. So for a while it was like, they would sleep okay, and then they were getting up a lot. Then there was like, hey, they're not eating as consistently, and now we have 2, right? So they kind of can shift. That one will do this, and they're both aligned on certain things. So that's different. Yeah, and I think it's just the one pain is that very, very much Groundhog's Day. Like Monday through Thursday is basically the same, like to the T. If I do it exactly how I'm supposed to do it, it's very, very similar. Friday through Sunday we get a little crazy. Maybe we sleep in, maybe we could, but like it's still then you have the kids home all day and you're not really used to that. So it's tough to get caught up on those big projects around the house that you'd like. And then the other thing that is just part of being a parent or an adult is like you just have less free time. Like I want to be able to do this and go do this, but like I really have to plan it. So it's like I don't want to leave her with the two twins after work for 3-4 hours by herself. So rarely am I going out and just hanging out or going to a basketball game. With like it's got to be kind of pre-planned, where I used to just like see her after work, talk to her, be like, hey, gonna go do this or do this, and like don't really have that opportunity anymore, which is that's just part of life. I think you just have to kind of roll with the punches, but eventually we'll break out of that. I'm really looking forward to the summer because we'll get home from daycare, we can actually go outside, go for a walk, and do some stuff. Like that's what I'm excited for. So kind of just cooped up in the winter right now, but really just looking forward when they can get moving around a little bit, which then ultimately they're going to get into everything. Just almost yesterday we were coming home from daycare, I was taking care of one. I look on the ground with Melanie, she's a little bit more of a squirmier one, and she's like making a beeline towards my laptop where it's up on a counter and there's a cord. I'm like, okay, we need to stop, and like that, those types of things you just remember. So it's fun, it's cool, it's just a different phase of life. You kind of just, I'm glad I did it when I did it, but like I can't imagine doing it 10 years ago, 8 years ago, like just not being prepared to be like, okay, I'm at least somewhat established with my routine or responsibilities, but it's also just like a lot of their things come first now, and instead of worrying about, I don't know, there's just like certain things I'm doing in the kitchen. I'm like, oh, gotta get the bottles ready, gotta get this, and this, and it kind of just becomes part of your life, right? While I'm cooking dinner, I'm doing this, or while I'm gonna run to the bathroom quick, I'm gonna start a bottle and come. It's just you kind of just implement it in there and getting better at it. But yeah, with two of them, it's a lot, but it's pretty easy right now, honestly. In the grand scheme of things, like as they get older, it's gonna be a lot more commitments to have to do and a lot more things. You're gonna have to feed them a couple meals, not just a bottle or some baby food. So it's that's a long-winded answer, but it's been yeah, it's been quite a journey.
I love that. What was your expectation prior to?
I had no expectation. Friends of mine that would reach out, and I think I have a couple friends, similar to you, Jordan, like that also just had kids. So like you kind of just swap back and forth how things are going. A few of them have said the same thing. I don't know how you do with two of them. It's like, thankfully we don't know any different, right? If we would have had one then two, I mean, I can't even imagine. My brother had that actually. I have a 6-year-old niece and then two twins. So it's like, that would be crazy to go from that. So we don't know any better, which is great. I think I definitely thought it would be a little bit easier. So like in my head, everyone's visioning, when you're young, like I'm gonna have one kid. That's gonna be simple. You swap that with mom and dad. Mom and dad can do their. It's like you don't really have that autonomy anymore. But I think just the day to day, like keeping ahead of things, keeping things flowing was something I didn't expect. I've always liked kids. Kids are funny to me. They're entertaining. So like now they're at an age where we can joke around and I can tease them and I'm roughhousing and they like that. Which is great and all, but like it's that I always expected to be fun. That's the easy part. I could sit and mess around with the kid all day long, but like, yeah, I think it's just like the constant like, hey, you're upset, but I'm trying to take care of your sister right now who's also upset, but like I know you're not as upset as she is because she's sick, or I'm doing like it's just like this like trying to. That's the hard part really, is like when I think about it, as I'm saying it, like negotiating with yourself when there's two of them and it's just you, like who is the priority right now? Like, is it the priority that's like needs to get fed, or is it the priority that the person that's just pretending she's upset, or the one that it's just, that's the really difficult part, because you're like, damn, like I'm having to choose right now, which is wild. But yeah, I don't know. Like I knew the fun part of parenthood. I always knew I would enjoy, but just the unforeseen, like I don't say monotonous, but just like the routine things that you just have to do that are kind of just get a little bit old, but there's really no way to make them fun other than just be like, okay, got it done. See how fast I can do it. Maybe there's a different way I can do it that kind of makes it more efficient. But again, we're dealing with small things right now. Like we're not even into like they're 3 or 4 and they're outside playing right at the park, and we get home and they're muddy. I got to clean them, and they want a full meal, and they're not actually sleeping, and then they can crawl out to come into your bed. I think it's easier right now, but I don't think anyone ever expects to have twins. So that's also the other thing. Like, never expected that, but just rolling with it.
Yeah, that definitely, I don't want to say complicates it, but changes your experience versus anybody who's only had one. I think that's kind of probably clear. That I like your point. It's like we don't know difference, so 2 isn't harder than 1 because we didn't have one. But then if you have one, I guess like similar to your friends, I just can't fathom the 2.5, 3 months that I've gone through having multiple is just like insane. I'm just like, I don't know. But I guess there's also like this period maybe where you have more, I don't know, emotions or just that like negative aspect of it. And it could just be like where I'm at of like, it's really hard to see the green grass or the light because the tunnel's so dark per se. But I'm also unemployed. So there's like other things that are in it where trying to find a job and I'm taking care of the child. So that creates like more complexities. But even if I had a job, then you got to find daycare. So it's, again, as you're even talking, I'm like, that's so interesting because I think 3 is going to be the best. Like I'm looking forward to that because like right now it's just like I can't understand like this need or that need and all that. But your point's valid. It's like, but then they'll have dirt. They'll be running in front of cars. Like, okay, yeah, that does sound pretty bad. So, and that's something I grasped early from people is it's just like, it's just different. It's not easier as they get older, from older parents. It's just different. And I read in this book that most of like the parental advice is all focused on a future state. If you think about sleep training per se, it's to get them to eventually sleep. But the issue is that makes us then assume that the child's purpose is to grow up. And that was like instantly of like, yeah, duh. But then he's like, but the child's purpose is to be a child. Like that's all their purpose is just to be a child. And that has been like one of my biggest takeaways is like, the child has helped me be present in the shit. Like, even though I can like go to my mind of like, I can't wait till we're talking about, you know, Socrates and Seneca and all these cool topics that I like to talk about. But like, that gets me out of the moment. And then that's in every realm of life. Once I get a job, I'll be happy. But it's like, how can I be happy right now in this shit moment? Has that been something you've thought of? Because it's to your point, it's like, sometimes you have to make tough decisions. You're in that moment. Have you thought of that at all of like it's forced you to be more present?
First, the 2 to 3 month stretch is really tough. Like that was really hard. And then we got daycare, so like that helped, but like that was an extremely hard thing. So I understand what you're going through, and it does get better. As far as those moments, I think the moments that are like really where things slow down is like between like 7:30, 9 o'clock, where it's like they're kind of tired out, they had their last bottle. You get them in their pajamas, maybe they don't like that, and they're kind of just chilling. Everyone's chilling, your kind of lights are off, and you're just like really rocking them, or they're like falling asleep. That's the best. You're like, okay, I could do this forever. And you realize that could be the rest of the night, or that could be only a 10-minute moment until they need something again. So you kind of just take it for what it is at that point. I really, really tried to like, you know, I listen to music a lot during the day, and rarely am I just in silence in my own house where I'm working, because listening to a podcast or music or something kind of just keeps my flow going. But when it's like have kids and they're not screaming, but crying, that's a really tough thing for me, because I'm like, okay, I want to fix it, but I also know you need to cry, but it's like just a really annoying noise. Like you try to like block it out a little bit. So it's like, that's the real, I don't know, difficult thing for me is just like, man, like I know you're upset. I hear you. I'm doing everything I can. Generally we get to a point where it's okay, but like, just, I want to make you feel better. But like, just that sound to me is like, man, it's annoying. Plus it's like, there's something I could be doing better that's going to help you. So like, how do I get to that faster? So yeah, just the fun moments. And you kind of just, I have so many pictures on my phone, and like, you know, some days we give them a bath and they don't really love it. Other days they're splashing around. So you're like, oh, that was cool. So you're always looking like, hey, maybe they're going to love this bath, or maybe they're going to wake up and be in a great mood. And like, you know, every time we've done something, they're usually like it at least once, no matter what. Like sometimes putting on pajamas is a blast, and they're rolling around and they're laughing. So you just kind of think every single time I'm going to feed them, it's going to be easier. Every time I'm going to try to burp them, it's going to be easier. Every time we get home from daycare, they're going to be in a great mood and want to play with themselves for an hour. It's like, I don't know. You just look at those moments like, okay, fingers crossed, every time we're doing something, it's always the best moment, but you always know throughout the day we used to love this. Now we don't love it anymore. Well, we're kind of just resetting the way we're growing up.
So Matt, maybe to end with a lot of the things in the world constantly changing, AI, obviously, something we touched on a bit. What do you hope in 5, 10, 15 years that we still have today? And I know I asked you this question on our first episode, so I'm kind of curious maybe if you pull out the same answer I doubt you're prepared to answer this, but what do you hope we still have? What do you hope stays the same with things constantly changing? You can go business, but probably the best I want is life, something personal. What do you hope we as a collective keep doing or don't change?
Yeah, my memory is not as good as it once was. It used to be really good, so I cannot remember what I said in the previous podcast. And like, I used to strive, like, pride myself, and I'd be like, "Oh, I remember that," and that was, and like, I just don't have that anymore. So I would say, I was kind of thinking about this question. I was gonna put it up on Twitter as like a poll, and then again, just didn't think about it. But I was driving, like, well, it's like, what's more important, like your in 15 years, like your online reputation or like your interpersonal reputation. And I feel like we're getting more and more away from like having personally, and I might just be in my own bubble, like I work from home, go to the gym, go to the grocery store. That's really it right now. And again, we're in the winter, so maybe that'll change come summer, but like I would say just like having more of those interactions in public, I think are great. I think online is great. Like you and I probably never could, I know right now, couldn't find time to go meet and do a podcast for, an hour or 45 minutes. But the fact that we can carve this out from your house, from my house, and do that is awesome. I think that's great. But just finding that dynamic of like still meeting up in person and doing those things with people, I think is huge. There's something to be said about that. Like having worked virtual for like 3-4 years, like there is that little human element that you miss of being like, hey, I'm going to swing into the next person's cubicle or go grab lunch with them to talk about life or actual work stuff. Because in my head, I'm always thinking everyone else is really, really busy. You don't want to bother them. And I always try to communicate that when I'm working is like, hey, like, bring the questions, like Slack me, let's do a huddle quick, let's talk about it, because like I want you to know that I'm always here to help you, and vice versa if I'm ever stuck to do that. But I think just like more human interaction. I think a lot of times I go out in public and I don't know, sometimes I just like want to just put my head down, have my headphones in and do my own thing, but there's other times like you do want to have those conversations just randomly in the line somewhere. And I don't necessarily think we're going away from that. I think there's peak, ebbs and flows of that, and whatever's going on in the world, whether it be political or financial or economical or even just locally, that people get irritated, or even just, I mean, for God's sakes, the winter. Like no one wants to sit and have a conversation outside where they're loading up their groceries. Like it's cold out. I don't want to do that. But I think just that balance between like not spending an enormous amount of time socializing, knowing that hey, we could make this still work virtually, but also still find like we're not going to live behind screens forever. I don't even know if that was similar to the answer I gave initially, but I think just that balance is important.
I love that. I mean, I think your question is interesting, like the dichotomy you open with of the in-person brand or like your personal clout, like in-person clout versus digital clout. I don't know. I find that there's almost like kind of extrapolating a little bit away, but there's almost like this balance that I've tried to do where I've seen people who have that digital clout. They're really well known digitally. And I just have like a question. I'm like, but do you meet anybody in your city? Do you even know? And now they could be in a big city. Green Bay is like a perfect size where I can go to coffee shops and see people. So maybe they're in New York, but it's almost like neither is great to just be known in your city, but not by people. So you don't meet with people online and you don't get that connection, but then only online. I feel like my thought is that there's a lot you can hide when you're just like a digital personality, where then like you meet someone in person. I've had a few of those where I've followed people. You were obviously not that way, but like I'll meet with them and I'm like, yeah, I don't really like you like in person. Like the vibe's off. Like you were really cool with your 100 characters, but now that you're explaining more. So I really like that balance and I think, try not to.
And I think that question came to me this morning because I was like, just thinking about, anticipating this podcast and how we met and just online, and also like the last few jobs I've received are because basically I have a decent LinkedIn following, like really focused on curating that. And when I was building it out, like truly like in a 30-mile radius, just connecting with people that were in marketing, whether it was social media specialist or director of marketing, like literally would send a message if they would connect. I would copy and paste almost the same message, like, hey, really happy to connect, insert name so-and-so, just trying to grow my presence in Northeast Wisconsin, like happy to chat about marketing. And like, that was just the start of it. And then it's expanded. It's like, oh, Matt has these experiences, and like, you can go and look at that profile, which, is something I've curated, but it's at least there's a footprint online where I have friends of mine or family members, or I'm like, they're looking for a new job. And I'm like, well, you didn't even like have a backbone of that. You don't even have that opportunity. So like, and I don't know, I Googled pretty much everyone, right? So you're like, and you Google and you're like, oh, he has this or that. And like, I have colleagues or family members where I'm like, oh man, they have like no online footprint. And there's other people you're like, oh, they were putting out YouTube videos like 8 years ago. So it's just like, I don't know, like I always like to use it as a reference, but I think 100% to your point, like you can fake it online as much as you want. And I'm sure anyone listening to this can come up with people in their head that they think either, celebrity or someone they've actually met like that. And then there's people, locally where it's like that person might be doing great things, but no one really knows about it, which is like, unless they're getting, I don't know, like unless they're going and talking about it in the city hall or down in downtown, like I don't, how would anyone know that you're maybe, doing some philanthropic, whatever that word is, service work in your community. Like, how would anyone know that unless you're not, maybe you're not doing it for that, but it's like, it would at least encourage other people to do it, right? Like, hey, so-and-so went and volunteered and did this. Like, I don't know. You're not trying to brag, but you're trying to encourage other people to want to do it, right? To make your community better. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a balance. It's a weird thing.
Positively influence others. You can do more of that digitally, I find, to your point of sharing your philanthropic work. Like, it just, I had to think about it like 7 times in my head because I didn't want to miss it. No, I'm just kidding. It is a tough word. But yeah, I think there's a balance. And I don't know. I think, like, if I would have to choose, so if someone came to me and they're like, pick one, which is always like a stupid kind of thing, I think honestly I would pick digital, because it's like we're given these tools from above. And to your point, the person who only operates in person and never shares stuff online, or they're just like looking at the tool and they're like, I'll go with like the other tool that's older rather than using this new tool. And it's like, to your point, it's not to brag, it's not to boast. So you have to do it in like the appropriate way. But it seems like you're driving a horse when there's a car right there.
Yeah,
it's like,
and it's just time, right? Like, I could put out a tweet and so many people see it, or a Facebook, and like, at least I know people, like I can see, like if I go, where am I going to go and talk about something like that people are actually going to listen? Like, how many people could I really pull in to have a conversation? Like, even if I was for the next 30 days, every person I actually interpersonally knew was telling them about this one thing I did, like, how many people could I really connect with on that? 20, 30? Like, how many people are you really going to see on a daily basis that you could, like, hey, I did this, I did that, like, where I could do that in this, while I'm feeding a baby and get 3 times as many people to see it. Like, that's, I don't know, a little bit of time in and energy out type of a situation, or energy and time, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, which is probably more front of mind for you and I as we don't have as much of it, or we feel it's escaping. So you're starting to be like, how can I do it? But before that, obviously, we were both online anyway. So I think both of us are doing it. And there's tons of others who are doing it in a great way. But then it's just like, sometimes I'll meet people. And to your point too, like the job search, it's just so much more helpful when you've built the house rather than like it's snowing and I'm trying to, or maybe a tent. It's like it's raining and I'm building my tent versus being like, I built my tent when it wasn't raining. So then when it rained, I had something to go inside of or to use for comfort. So I appreciate that, and hope someone online listening here might kind of have that push to be like, I know I need to do a little more digital. Let's do it. So I appreciate you going there. And yeah, I hope more people balance both in person with the digital, as they can feed each other and they can help each other. And they're both kind of needed in 2025 and beyond. Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt, for coming on the podcast. This was a lot of fun. I know we'll get together in the near future in person, because again, we got to practice what we're preaching.
100%.
So thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming on. And this is the end of the podcast. What one idea or topic of conversation stood out to you today? Write it down, share it with a friend, post it on social. The main thing is take action. That's how we go from theory to mastery. We need to practice. We need to put it into practice. Thank you for listening and being here, and I hope you tune in next week.